I'm DJ Diya Anantharaman, music director and radio host of Unearthly Machine at KUCR Riverside 88.3, and I'm here with Justin R. Cruz Gallego, or JRCG. Justin released his latest album, Grim Iconic Sadistic Mantra, in August via Sub Pop Records. We have convened today to chat. Good morning, Justin. It's lovely to see you. How are you doing on this fine September morning?
Good morning, Dia. Great to see you too. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a beautiful morning in the Pacific Northwest. Just getting started. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. Let's start from the beginning. I did some digging and learned that your artistic origin story stems from relocating to the Pacific Northwest and finding solace in Seattle's local punk scene. Can you tell me a little bit more about your musical background and how it informs your artistic philosophy to this point?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I grew up kind of half in the Northwest and half in Arizona, and I was kind of, from an early age interested in punk music, but didn't wasn't really fully introduced to it in like real life up until not until moving here to the Northwest. And I became kind of immersed in the local like DIY punk scene and warehouse spaces and house shows, and kind of my foundation was like built upon that and kind of revolving around this local record label called Iron Lung Records. This based around the band Iron Lung and their sort of international like world and kind of network of punks, and sort of was kind of taken under their wing and learned about just so much of the inner workings of artistry and just how to be in a band. And yeah, I gained so much from kind of being a part of that world that like luckily was so specific to the Northwest, but also had this sort of like I said, like network to band like-minded artists like all over the world. So I was very, very fortunate to sort of find them when I did.
A lot of Grim Iconic is made of electrified, fuzzy synths combined with bursts of noise and charged drums. I love how this release is utterly saturated from cover to cover with energy. I love just the amount of dynamic noise there is in this release. Can you tell me about your creative process on this album, as well as its sonic and emotional landscapes and how they show up through some of your songwriting, vocal, and instrumental choices?
Yeah, definitely. I think that like, kind of going off of the last question too, it's like having that kind of more punk foundation, or kind of growing up kind of immersed in like people making a lot of noise or art within noise, and that's kind of just embedded in like influences that I take and what I kind of make naturally, I feel like. But I think growing up in that scene too, I was also kind of clued in on like people who are really sort of like pushing what um like aggressive or punk or experimental music can be. And I think that is where I would love to kind of have this music sit in line with, or be related to. Just I love the idea of punk not having to be like this traditional sort of approach, and it's just more of like the intention. And I grew up also in Arizona, and I am Mexican American, and equally with the punk influence, I am like pulling from all this Latin music history and influence that was also kind of like around constantly, and still is. And so kind of marrying those approaches, but also seeing the similarities and connecting those as like something that was like deeply influential or motivating behind making this record, and really just sort of presenting like my own like take on like how these influences can be pushed further or seen in different lights, you know.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, with your background in the Seattle punk and DIY scenes, as well as your familiarity with Latin music, you went on to make experimental music that was uniquely Latino in its experimentation. With past releases like Ajo Sunshine and the Wash soundtrack, how would you say the music on Grim Iconic is influenced by your past work and musical background?
Yeah, definitely. I think just growing up in that world and having it be just a part of who I am, deep, speaking about just being Mexican and I think that like also inherently being a drummer first and foremost, I like kind of start anything kind of based around rhythm. And that's just kind of an easy access point for me to like kind of build momentum behind like any sort of inspiration or anything becoming a song. It starts kind of rhythmically for me, and I think both those kind of like punk and Latin music speaks very fluently to that, and it's easy sort of to access that source of inspiration through rhythm for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely noticed how drum forward and rhythmic this release is. Especially, I know in some other outlets you talked about how this specific release is more rhythm forward than some of your past work. I definitely noticed that. And from noisy krautrock inspired sensibilities to influences like Adam Curtis and Miles Davis, I'd love to know what were some of the main inspirations for this project. And this could be other music, media, literature, film, spiritual occurrences, cultural experiences, religious epiphanies, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you brought up the Adam Curtis reference or influence, and that was something that was deeply sort of influential for me. And I think the title to me best sort of made a nod maybe at that like um sense of kind of disillusion that like Adam Curtis kind of talks about a lot in his documentaries and his work. And I really loved that the title sort of embodied that, but also at the same time, for me personally, Grim Iconic Sadistic Mantra feels also sort of like slightly maybe tongue in cheek or like sarcastic. And I like that it didn't have this message of disillusion with like a mopey sort of like overtone to it. It had this sort of like um this sense that you're pushed so far past a point of shock or anything, it becomes almost surreal or you're unfazed. And I like that the title also has this sort of like spiritual aspect of it. And I think that all tied into it made it so complex and kind of in a cool way that I think really lent itself to the music, because the music, like you said, is very lush and sort of like, front to back kind of yeah, very filled to the brim. And I thought that they both kind of catered um to each other, the music and then also the title. But other than that, other than like any other like influences, I was just so focused with rhythmically pushing something forward, but also having something that to me kind of like captured a moment, whether it be that sense of disillusionment or that sense of like playfulness around being experimental. Those were the kind of two sort of targets that I kind of had while making it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested in Grim Iconic's artwork as well. It's beautiful and natural, yet psychedelic and almost saturine and dizzying. I'm curious about the cover art's direction and the story behind the photo.
Yeah, the photo I actually had very similar to the title of the record. I had it like very early on in making, and both the title and the photo kind of stuck. Usually I'll have like a working title or some imagery that'll kind of like work off of, and it'll change throughout the process. But for this record, both the title and the photo were kind of around the entire time. The photo was taken by a friend, Ellen Rummel here in Tacoma. Super amazing photographer. She's also kind of immersed in the Northwest punk scene. She's taken like tons of amazing photos of artists and bands up here. And yeah, I was just drawn to this photo pretty immediately. I think just because it was so beautiful, and I thought like paired with this music, I wanted like a pretty intense contrast. Not that I don't think that the music has its beautiful moments, because I definitely do. And I do think that it is like soft at times, but I just thought that like the lushness of the photo, the dense of like what was happening with like the nature in it, um, felt like it complemented just like the wildness and the density of the sonically within the record.
Absolutely. I feel that too. I'm also interested in the music videos in this album. They're so uniquely shot and edited. I really liked the quick editing on the video for Chola Beat and how it creatively shows off your range of skills on this album. The video for Drummy is also a favorite of mine with its vivid colors, trippy shots, and layered visuals. It's like a carefully curated fever dream. The video for 34 is repetitive and surreal, flipping a domestic situation on its head, and the video for Dog Ear is somberly lit, disorienting, and expressive. And all of these videos carry forth a common theme of surrealism and chaos and that sort of disillusioned, disoriented state, especially in the sequencing and editing of the shots. Can you tell me a little bit more about the choices to include these types of visuals in your music videos and how they function in tandem with your album's themes?
Yeah, I functioned very like visual. Like I think that like so much that I draw from is like, you know, cinematic like stuff, and like I'm always sort of referencing like how the flow of a record feels in the lens of like a full album, and like how it can kind of mimic, how you would digest like a movie or, something, anything more visual. So that's always kind of in the back of my mind. And making the music videos was like kind of an interesting thing because I had never really done that before. So it was an actual like opportunity to sort of like lean into that side and try different things. And I made two of the music videos with a long friend of mine, an old friend of mine, Mitch Wells, who plays in the band Thou. And him and I had always kind of talked about collaborating in that sort of way, not necessarily with music videos, but just with my music, incorporated into his video stuff. And so this was a unique opportunity to do two videos together and see what we could do. We did both Drummy and also Choya Beat. And yeah, I love the opportunity to sort of like attempt to make the visual side like credit what's happening sonically. And like you said, quick edits and like a lot of like jarring sort of like movements, but also sort of like not really fully getting a full picture of what is going on. I think that's all sort of things that ended up lending itself to the actual music, especially in this sort of like 3 to 4 minute, short sort of like template.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost, especially videos, I think maybe like Drummy and even 34, I feel they have kind of like a plot going on, except with 34, it's kind of just very condensed.
Yes, yeah, yeah. That was an interesting one too, because like, I had originally had something like a little bit more planned for that. And then like working with video stuff, I mean, I'm very new to it. And you have to sort of um be quick to adapt, and like when things aren't gonna work out, you have to sort of pivot very quickly, from what I experienced doing these videos. And 34 was one of those, and it ended up being sort of a day of sort of like switch up, where it was like, okay, this is what the concept is going to be now. We're going to just roll with it. And I'm like really happy with how that turned out. I love like I love things that feel like narrative, but like not like very clearly delivered, or like not overly delivered. I like as a viewer, I like to feel like I have to work a little extra hard to sort of like put it all together. And hopefully that's like not annoying for others, but I personally like enjoy things like that.
Yeah, it definitely gives your viewers a bit more to pick apart instead of just handing it to them on a plate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You're playing a show at the Zebulon in LA on October 8th. What are you looking forward to the most about this venue and location?
Oh, I love playing Zebulon. It's a great spot. It sounds wonderful. It has like a great like what they're doing right now with their curation of it's kind of unmatched. I think that they are just kind of nailing it as far as the artists that they're bringing in and the community that they're like trying, and from my view, succeeding in creating there. Um, so yeah, no, I think that like it felt very exciting to end the tour at Zebulon. Just very comfortable, and also just a good ending to a long trip.
Absolutely. Let's talk gear. What would you say was the most essential piece of gear on the particular sound of Grim Iconic?
Well, not just limited to Grim Iconic, but for pretty much all the records I've made under my name, the Korg MS-20 is my favorite instrument, aside from percussion and drums. But I think like sonically, if I have one thing that like I could not live without, it is that synthesizer. Um, Even though I, threw it was thrown at you, but yes.
I was gonna say you loved it so much you had to let it go.
Well, I got a lot of blowback on that because people were like, how could you throw that? But just for anyone listening who had that reaction, that one was actually broken before it was thrown. So,
Yeah.
there was no saving it as is.
No cords were harmed in the making of this video.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Lovely. Lastly, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only take three pieces of gear with you, what would they be and why?
Okay, the Korg MS-20, because I feel like for the reasons I said, but honestly, getting into synthesizers, I kind of that was one of the first ones I ever got, and then I had a couple others. It was funny when I had the other synthesizers, it made me understand the MS-20 better, and I ended up just kind of reverting back to that. And from there, I just kind of been writing it out, kind of sprinkling other things in around it, but really having that be sort of a comfortable like home base as far as like starting and trying to like build inspiration. So I definitely would have to choose that. Um, Aside from that, I would probably choose. I mean, I feel like it's cheating to just say the whole drum set, but maybe I'll try to get a little bit more creative with that. Um, okay, I have these like specific drumsticks that I used on the record that I really love how they sound recorded. They're like they're like some weird artist edition, but they're titled like a ride stick, and they sound really beautiful on ride cymbals. To get super in the weeds here, but like, yes, I love how those sound recorded, and I never have kind of like fancied myself a gear snob or person, but sort of while creating, I have like stumbled across certain little things that like I do really love, and those drumsticks, for whatever reason, are one of them. The other thing I would say was a microphone that I use, and it's an Electro Voice 635 or an Electro Voice 636 Slim Air. I think the 635. Um, Let me just look it up real quick to make sure. Yeah, the 635. It's an omnidirectional mic. It's one that I use live, and I have used live for a long time. Um, I play drums and I sing live. Um, and sometimes that can be challenging in the sense that this microphone is kind of like right in front of me and it ends up picking up a bunch of my drums. And it can be like challenging because like to mix that, you have all these like drums kind of bleeding into the vocal mic, but I feel like it kind of has also become like part of the sound too.
Definitely.
It's just one of those things that like, you know, sometimes the things that are like the things that people try to avoid end up becoming part of like what makes something special. And I think that like that's probably one of them. And I just love that mic. I love what it's, capable of, and I've used it many times.
Absolutely. I'd love to catch that effect live, especially with the tracks where you have noisier vocals. I feel like the high end of the drums being picked up might really complement that.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a hard thing to harness on the mixing side for whoever's doing that, um but yeah, it's definitely effective.
Awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been wonderful to learn about the process of Grim Iconic and the recording and the inspiration that went into it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.